The Soviet era, a period marked by rapid industrialization, political upheaval, and the rise of a new kind of tyrant, Joseph Stalin. Emerging from the ashes of the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union was born under the banner of communism, a radical ideology that sought to uproot the old order and establish a society where wealth and power were shared equally among its citizens. Yet the reality was far from this ideal. The Soviet Union was dominated by an iron fist, a fist that belonged to a man named Joseph Stalin. Stalin's rise to power was as swift as it was ruthless. By the mid-1920s he had secured his position as the leader of the Soviet Union, and he was determined to transform the largely agrarian society into a modern industrial powerhouse. To achieve this, he instituted a series of 5-year plans designed to boost industrial production at an unprecedented rate. But this rapid industrialization came at a great human cost, as millions were uprooted from their homes, forced into labor, and subjected to harsh living conditions. Stalin's regime was also marked by intense political repression. Dissenting voices were not tolerated. Intellectuals, politicians, and ordinary citizens who dared to criticize the regime or were simply suspected of disloyalty were ruthlessly purged. This period, known as the Great Purge, saw hundreds of thousands of people executed or sent to labor camps. Communism under Stalin was not a shared utopia, but a dictatorship where power was concentrated in the hands of a few, and where fear and suspicion were the order of the day. Personal liberties were curtailed, dissent was crushed, and the state controlled every aspect of life, from the economy to the arts. This was the backdrop against which the notorious Gulags came into existence. The Gulags, a chain of brutal labor camps, where millions of people suffered under Stalin's regime. Before we dive into the chilling details of life within these camps, let's first define what Gulags were and their intended purpose. The term Gulag is an acronym for the Russian phrase Glavno Upravlenie Lagere, which translates to main camp administration. But the Gulags were far more than just camps. They were a vast network of forced labor camps and prisons that spread across the immense expanse of the Soviet Union. The inception of the Gulag System can be traced back to a law passed on the 25th of August, 1930. This law effectively legalized the use of forced labor as a form of punishment. The Soviet government, under the iron fist of Joseph Stalin, saw this as an opportunity to not only punish dissidents, but also to fuel the country's industrialization drive. It was a chillingly efficient two-birds-one-stone strategy. Who were the unfortunate souls sent to these camps, you may ask? Well, they were a tragically diverse group. They included everyone from petty criminals to political prisoners, from intellectuals branded as dangerous to ordinary people who had fallen foul of the regime's many draconian laws. In the eyes of Stalin's regime, they were all deemed enemies of the state, disposable bodies to be used and discarded in the ruthless pursuit of progress. But it's crucial to remember that the Gulags were not just a system of punishment. They were also a tool of political repression. They served as a stark warning to anyone who dared to oppose the regime, a clear message that dissent would not be tolerated, that it would be met with the harshest of repercussions. The Gulags became a symbol of the horrors of Stalin's regime, a tool of political repression and forced labor. Each camp, each prisoner, each story of survival or death stands as a haunting testament to a time when human life and dignity were sacrificed at the altar of a twisted ideology. Surviving in the Gulags was a daily battle against hunger, cold, and brutal punishment. Life inside the Gulags was a stark contrast to the world outside. The prisoners, stripped of their freedom and dignity, were thrust into a harsh and unforgiving environment. The Gulags were designed to break the human spirit, and to a large extent, they succeeded. The work that prisoners were forced to do was backbreaking and often pointless. They were made to toil in the bitter cold, cutting down trees, digging ditches, or mining coal with little more than their bare hands. The workdays were long, often stretching to 14 or even 16 hours, and the prisoners were given just enough food to keep them on the brink of starvation. A piece of bread, a bowl of thin soup, that was all that stood between a prisoner and death by hunger. The Gulags weren't just about physical labor though, they were also about control and punishment. Even the smallest infraction could lead to severe consequences. Talking back to a guard, stealing a piece of bread, or simply being too weak to work could result in brutal beatings or solitary confinement in a tiny unheated cell. The message was clear: obey or suffer. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. Amid the hardship, there were stories of resilience and survival. prisoners formed tight-knit communities, sharing food, stories, and even laughter. They sang songs to keep their spirits up, wrote poems to express their feelings, and drew pictures to document their experiences. They found ways to resist, to hold on to their humanity in a place designed to strip it away. There are countless testimonies from survivors that paint a vivid picture of life in the gulags. These stories are a testament to the human spirit, a reminder of our capacity to endure, to hope, and to survive, even in the face of the most brutal and inhumane conditions. Despite the harsh conditions, some prisoners managed to survive, their stories serving as a stark reminder of human resilience. The Gulag system was vast and complex, spanning the length and breadth of the Soviet Union. This network of forced labor camps was a fundamental component of Stalin's regime, a dark and cruel instrument used to suppress opposition and control the masses. Gulags were scattered throughout the vast expanse of the Soviet Union, from the frigid Arctic regions of Siberia to the remote wilderness of Central Asia. Each camp was a cog in this vast machine, operating under a strict hierarchy and rigid rules designed to break the human spirit. The Gulag system was not just about punishment, it was about control, manipulation, and the extraction of labor under the most brutal conditions imaginable. The administrative structure of the gulags was as complex as it was ruthless. At the helm was the NKVD, the Soviet secret police, with its vast network of informants and enforcers. They were the architects of the Gulag system, ensuring its smooth operation and ruthless efficiency. The NKVD's omnipresent eye watched over every aspect of the camps, from the allocation of prisoners to the enforcement of the grueling work quotas. Yet the Gulag system was not just a tool of political repression. It was also an integral part of the Soviet economy. The forced labor of millions of prisoners was used to carry out massive infrastructure projects, from building railways and highways to logging and mining operations. This labor was cheap, expendable, and seemingly endless. The human cost was enormous, but to the Soviet regime, it was a price worth paying to fuel the country's industrialization and economic growth. The Gulag system served a dual purpose for the Soviet Union. It was both a weapon of political oppression, used to silence dissent and instill fear, and an economic engine, driving the country's development at a staggering human cost. It was a brutal machine, meticulously designed and ruthlessly operated. The Gulag system was a brutal machine designed to crush dissent and fuel the Soviet economy. The downfall of the gulags was as sudden as their rise. With the death of Joseph Stalin in 1953, the winds of change began to blow through the Soviet Union. Stalin's successor, Nikita Khrushchev, initiated a policy of de-Stalinization, which sought to dismantle the cult of personality that had built up around Stalin and to liberalize the oppressive political climate. The gulags, as a cornerstone of Stalin's regime, were not immune to this change. Khrushchev and his administration began to view the camps as a symbol of the excesses and brutalities of Stalin's rule. As a result, the Gulag system, which had been a significant part of Soviet society and economy, began to crumble. In 1956, just 3 years after Stalin's death, Khrushchev made a secret speech to the 20th Congress of the Communist Party, denouncing Stalin's purges and the Gulag system. This marked the beginning of the end for the gulags. The following years saw the release of millions of prisoners. These were people who had been detained for political reasons, or who had been swept up in the indiscriminate purges that had characterized Stalin's regime. They returned to a society that was struggling to come to terms with the atrocities that had been committed in the name of progress and security. Investigations into the gulags followed, revealing the extent of the human rights abuses that had taken place. The world was shocked to learn about the brutal conditions, the forced labor, and the countless lives lost. These revelations exposed the dark underbelly of the Soviet Union, casting a shadow over its international reputation. Yet despite the closure of the gulags, their legacy persisted. The memories of those who had suffered within their walls could not be erased, nor could the societal scars left by the system be easily healed. The gulags had touched the lives of millions of people, and their impact would be felt for generations to come. The closure of the gulags marked the end of a dark chapter in Soviet history, but the scars of this period remain. The legacy of the gulags continues to haunt Russia and the world today. The impact of this brutal system was not confined to the years of its operation but extended far beyond, leaving deep scars on survivors, their families, and indeed, the entire fabric of Russian society. The Gulag System shattered countless lives. The survivors, those who managed to outlive their sentences, were often left physically debilitated and emotionally scarred. The trauma of the gulags was not theirs alone to bear. It trickled down to the generations that followed, imprinting on their collective memory a harsh narrative of suffering and survival. The effect of the gulags on Russian society was profound. A pervasive culture of fear was instilled, an echo of which can still be heard today. The society was polarized, with trust eroded and communities torn apart. This has fed into a lingering sense of mistrust and apprehension that continues to influence social dynamics in Russia. The role of the gulags in Soviet history is a subject of ongoing debate. Some argue that they were a necessary evil in a time of political upheaval, while others see them as a symbol of the inhumane and repressive nature of the Soviet regime. This debate is an integral part of Russia's struggle to reconcile with its past. Efforts have been made to commemorate the victims of the gulags and preserve their memory. Museums and memorials have been established, and stories have been documented, ensuring that the world never forgets this grim chapter of human history. These efforts serve not only as a tribute to the victims, but also as a stark reminder of the perils of political repression. The gulags, a grim reminder of the human cost of political repression, continue to cast a long shadow over Russia's past. Their legacy is a poignant testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity, and a stark warning against the repetition of such atrocities. The Soviet-era gulags, a testament to the horrors of political repression and forced labor. We've journeyed through the rise of the Soviet Union, under the iron fist of Stalin's regime, a time that saw the inception of these hellish prisons. We've delved into the harrowing daily life in the gulags, where millions were subjected to inhumane conditions, forced labor, and brutal punishments. We've unraveled the intricate Gulag System, a vast network of labor camps spread across the Soviet Union, a tool for political repression and economic exploitation. We've witnessed the eventual closure of these prisons, marking the end of a dark chapter in human history. Yet the legacy of the gulags lingers, a chilling reminder of the atrocities committed under the guise of political ideology. The story of the gulags serves as a stark warning of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of remembering our history.